Good morning, you guys. I hope you're having a good day. We are on week 4, lesson 8, which is crazy. We are going so far in this distance learning. I don't know how you guys are doing, but I wish I could talk to you guys in person, see you guys in the halls and after class and stuff. So it's sad, but we're learning about some cool people, and hopefully we can take this knowledge that we've learned during this time and take it with us into next year when you guys are 8th graders. So let's continue on with learning about our next American hero. Okay, so your do now for today is "The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them" by Ida B. Wells. I want you to answer these 2 questions. Number 1 says, what is this quote saying? What do these words mean exactly? What is the point of this quote? And the second one is, what does this quote mean to you personally? So what is this quote saying to you, or how do you take this quote in? I want you to go ahead and take a second. You can get a piece of binder paper, you can get white paper, you can get a little notepad. It doesn't really matter where you write this down. I just want to make sure that you are thinking about this and writing about it too. So take a second, pause this video, answer these 2 questions, and come back. Cool, hopefully you pause the video. I want you to think about when it says turn the light of truth. We talked about in Frederick Douglass about this figurative language. When people say the light, they're not literally turning a light on, but it's a metaphorical way to use that. So if someone is in the dark about something, meaning they don't know about it, and someone was to shine the light on that, they're kind of showing you what the truth is in that situation. So we're going to hear about somebody who shone the light on a lot of issues, and this person was Ida B. Wells, who that quote is from. So the genre of text we're going to be reading, it's an informational text, but it's in the form of a biography, which just means it's the story of somebody's life. Ida B. Wells was a leader in the civil rights movement. She went through a tragedy that inspired her to become an activist for discrimination against African Americans. So the civil rights movement, you guys might know it by the "I Have a Dream" speech from MLK. It's a time when African Americans fought back for their rights in America shortly after slavery. So basically, this person was involved in the civil rights movement, and she fought against discrimination against African Americans because she went through this personal tragedy, which is like something really sad that happened in her life. So to learn more about that, in order to really understand this article and who Ida B. Wells is, we need to learn a little bit more about what her life consisted of. So the question I want to ask you guys is, how does a personal tragedy motivate Ida B. Wells's actions? And have you experienced a personal tragedy in your life that has motivated you? You might not have experienced something, especially to the extent that Ida B. Wells did, but maybe you have, and maybe you can empathize and feel for what she went through in her life. So I want you to answer at least this first question as we watch, just underneath where you wrote your do now. So how does a personal tragedy motivate Ida B. Wells's actions? All right, let's go ahead and watch, and then we will discuss again.
In March of 1892, 3 black grocery store owners in Memphis, Tennessee were murdered by a mob of white men. Lynchings like these were happening all over the American South, often without any subsequent legal investigation or consequences for the murderers. But this time, a young journalist and friend of the victims set out to expose the truth about these killings. Her reports would shock the nation and launch her career as an investigative journalist, civic leader, and civil rights advocate. Her name was Ida B. Wells. Ida Bell Wells was born into slavery in Holly Springs, Mississippi on July 16, 1862, several months before the Emancipation Proclamation released her and her family. After losing both parents and a brother to yellow fever at the age of 16, she supported her 5 remaining siblings by working as a school teacher in Memphis, Tennessee. During this time, she began working as a journalist. Writing under the pen name Iola, by the early 1890s, she gained a reputation as a clear voice against racial injustice and became co-owner and editor of the Memphis Free Speech and Headlight newspaper. She had no shortage of material. In the decades following the Civil War, Southern whites attempted to reassert their power by committing crimes against Black people, including suppressing their votes, vandalizing their businesses, and even murdering them. After the murder of her friends, Wells launched an investigation into lynching. She analyzed specific cases through newspaper reports and police records, and interviewed people who had lost friends and family to lynch mobs. She risked her life to get this information. As a Black person investigating racially motivated murders, she enraged many of the same Southern white men involved in lynchings. Her bravery paid off. Most whites had claimed and subsequently reported that lynchings were responses to criminal acts by Black people. But that was not usually the case. Through her research, Wells showed that these murders were actually a deliberate, brutal tactic to control or punish Black people who competed with whites. Her friends, for example, had been lynched when their grocery store became popular enough to divert business from a white competitor. Wells published her findings in 1892. In response, a white mob destroyed her newspaper presses. She was out of town when they struck, but they threatened to kill her if she ever returned to Memphis. So she traveled to New York, where that same year she republished her research in a pamphlet titled Southern Horrors: Lynch Law in All Its Phases. In 1895, after settling in Chicago, she built on Southern Horrors in a longer piece called The Red Record. Her careful documentation of the horrors of lynching and impassioned public speeches drew international attention. Wells used her newfound fame to amplify her message. She traveled to Europe, where she rallied European outrage against racial violence in the American South, in hopes that the U.S. government and public would follow their example. Back in the U.S., she didn't hesitate to confront powerful organizations, fighting the segregationist policies of the YMCA and leading a delegation to the White House to protest discriminatory workplace practices. She did all of this while disenfranchised herself. Women didn't win the right to vote until Wells was in her late 50s, and even then, the vote was primarily extended to white women only. Wells was a key player in the battle for voting inclusion, starting a Black women's suffrage organization in Chicago. But in spite of her deep commitment to women's rights, she clashed with white leaders of the movement. During a march for women's suffrage in Washington, D.C., she ignored the organizers' attempt to placate Southern bigotry by placing Black women in the back and marched up front alongside the white women. She also chafed with other civil rights leaders who saw her as a dangerous radical. She insisted on airing, in full detail, the atrocities taking place in the South, while others thought doing so would be counterproductive to negotiations with white politicians. Although she participated in the founding of the NAACP, she was soon sidelined from the organization. Wells' unwillingness to compromise any aspect of her vision of justice shined a light on the weak points of the various rights movements and ultimately made them stronger, but also made it difficult for her to find a place within them. She was ahead of her time, waging a tireless struggle for equality and justice, decades before many had even begun to imagine it possible. If you were inspired by Ida B. Wells...
Okay. So, to continue on with here, I hope that you answered this question. If you haven't, go ahead and answer it now. You can go back in the video, rewatch that, or you can just look it up on YouTube later. It's just how one journalist risked her life, and you can just search that and it'll come up. All right. So we're going to talk about 3 words that I'm sure that some of you or most of you have heard before, but I just want to explain exactly what the difference is between these 3 words. So the words are stereotype, prejudice, and discrimination. So a stereotype is something that is cognitive. Cognitive means it's something in your brain that you think of. And this is like how we categorize and label a person. So the things you hear about people like, oh, that's a stereotype about this type of person or this type of person. It's just something in our brain that we kind of almost do automatically. Prejudice. This is affective, which is like how you feel. So affective is feelings. And how do I feel about a person? What are my attitudes towards him or her? Maybe you're not actually acting on things, but when you see a type of person or a category of people, it's how you feel towards that on the inside. And then discrimination is behavioral. So what do you actually do towards other people? So how do I act towards a person? Do I actually do acts of discrimination against a certain type of person? So for example, to explain this further, if we're going to talk about women, a stereotype for women is women aren't great leaders. It's something that's been said about people, about women a lot. A prejudice would be women are inferior to men. That's how someone might feel about women if they think that the stereotype is true. And then discrimination would be women are not given the same opportunities as men. So because this stereotype is talked about, and because if people hear this stereotype, they're going to have this prejudice in their minds that women are inferior to men, then they might discriminate against them by not giving them opportunities. And then because I obviously don't believe this, I put my little "we can do it" image in the bottom. All right. Your annotation task for today's text is going to be, as you read, take notes on the examples of prejudice and discrimination that Wells experienced and how she worked towards ending them. So there are two ways that you're able to do this. The first way is going to be just highlighting in two different colors on the text itself. If your iPad is letting you highlight, or if you're on a laptop, you're able to do that. That would be highlighting. Maybe you want to use blue for taking notes on examples that the prejudice and discrimination against that Wells experienced. So how did Wells get discriminated against? And then maybe you want to use yellow for how she worked towards ending them. Or if you're doing it on a piece of paper, or if you just don't like the annotation on Common Lit, or if you're not able to do it, what you can do is just make a little table like this on your piece of paper. On one side, it's going to say prejudice and discrimination that Ida experienced. And then on the other side, how Ida worked towards ending them. And what you would do is just write down your quote and the paragraph number here. This is going to make it super easy for you guys when you do your short answer response and when you do your discussion question, because you're going to have your evidence already written out here. You're not even going to have to search for it. So either like this or just highlighting on Common Lit. All right, we're going to go to Common Lit now. And I'm just going to read through until the first guiding question like I usually do. All right, it says, Ida B. Wells was an African-American journalist, editor, suffragist, sociologist, and an early leader in the civil rights movement. The following is a short biography of Ida B. Wells and the personal tragedy that she experienced that pushed her to raise national awareness about violence and discrimination against African Americans. As you read, take notes on the examples of prejudice and discrimination that Wells experienced and how she worked towards ending them. All right. We're going to start at the beginning. It says, Ida B. Wells, the young journalist from Memphis, Tennessee, stepped out of Natchez, Mississippi church with a smile on her face. She had just signed up 20 new subscribers for Free Speech, the Black newspaper she owned with her business partner, J.L. Fleming. Since she had begun traveling up and down the Mississippi Valley seeking new subscriptions, the Memphis Weekly's readership had more than doubled. The minister of the church walked up to Ida with a newspaper in his hand. Miss Wells, something bad's happened in Memphis. A bolt of fear shot through Ida. Her hand shook slightly as she took the 10 March 1892 edition of the Memphis Commercial. The night before, a mob of white men had seized 3 black grocery store owners, dragged them down to the railroad tracks, and shot them to death. One of the store owners, Thomas Moss, had begged for his life for the sake of his wife, daughter, and unborn child. When he realized he was going to die, he said, "Tell my people to go west. There is no justice for them here." So this is not necessarily directly discrimination against Ida B. Wells, because it didn't actually happen to her, but this person was someone that she knew. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this as my first part of my annotation task. So this is going to be prejudice and discrimination that Wells experienced. And I'm going to highlight this. And let's do yellow. It says, Ida's heart nearly stopped. She looked up into the minister's solemn face. It can't be. Ida's eyes welled with tears. Thomas Moss and his wife are my good friends. I'm godmother to their daughter, Maureen. This can't have happened to them. We come to question 1 of your guiding questions. It says, which statement best describes the event that upsets Ida? So this event that we just highlighted here, and you're going to have to decide which one. I just want to let you guys know that when we are doing our class time, Mr. Longo and I, we go through every single guiding question together and we make sure that you guys get the right answer. So we'll talk about it and ask you guys what you think the right answer is, and then we'll decide. I'll click on it and we'll see if it's right or not. If it's not right, we'll do it again before you guys click. If it is right, then everyone will click it and we'll go on to the next one. So make sure that you come to that class time because we're really giving you guys a lot of answers and we're talking through it with you, but it's also really helpful instead of just being on your own doing this by yourself. The other thing is, some of you have not been doing your assessment questions and not understanding why you're getting bad grades on this. If you don't do the assessment questions, we can't see it at all. It needs to be marked as done, and then you need to have finished all the assessment questions. So if you're getting zeros, even though you feel like you're doing your work, you might not have done the assessment questions. So here are some of the assessment questions. Again, we go through most of these with you, but I do want to point out that this one is short answer, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, but I'll just read it to you guys. It says, although this text is nonfiction, which means it is real, much of it is told like a story. What is the author's most likely purpose for writing the text in this way? So why would this author write this text in a story form instead of like, on this day she did this, on this day she did this? Why did the author really write this out and make you feel like it was a story being told to you? Why do it that way? What's the purpose? So for your short answer responses, I want to remind you guys that every single short answer response on Common Lit needs to be a CER. So that should look like first sentence is a claim that answers the question. Then the sentence frame you can use for that, I give you here. In the context of this passage, this is for the discussion question, but basically like in this text it states blah, blah, blah. Like if you were to go here, it says, what is the author's most likely purpose for writing the text in this way? The author's purpose for writing the text is, and then you're going to answer that question. The second sentence should always be evidence from the text. So in the text it states the quote and then the paragraph number you got that from. And the third sentence is going to be how the evidence proves your claim. Sentence frame, this shows that. So you would do that for the Common Lit question and also for this discussion question, which will be posted on Google Classroom. This one says, in the context of this passage, how do people create change? Cite evidence from the text, your own experiences, and other literature, art, or history in your answer. So maybe something that you felt that you were discriminated against, maybe you saw discrimination in your life, or you just want to do evidence from this text. And I want you to make sure you follow these sentence frames in that. All right. Let me know if you have any questions. Make sure you come to our office hours as we're going to give you a lot of help. Make sure you guys are getting good grades. Most of the people that are coming to office hours are getting good grades. And then you'll be able to come to FOAM Friday, tomorrow, if you guys come to more than 3 of the office hours. All right. Have a good rest of your day. I miss you guys. I wish we could see everyone in person, but I know you guys are doing a great job and doing your best at distance learning. So I will see you guys soon. Have a great day. Bye.